So I took part in the third Blackthornprod game jam where I made a game in 1 week called the Evil Grapes. I'm Mark, and in this channel I make game dev videos. If you are interested in that, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out the next videos. Game jam is an event where people need to make games in a short amount of time around a given theme. In the third Blackthornprod game jam, this time limit was 1 week. The theme was
Less is more.
After the theme was announced, I started brainstorming. Because of the short time limit, the idea should be simple enough to be able to finish the game in time, so I come up with a complex game idea. My initial thought was to make a platformer with several levels and a boss fight in the end, where if you have less lives, you gain more skills. Later, I discarded the platforming part and remained with only one boss fight and a tutorial level to introduce the mechanics to the player in a safe environment. In the final game, you can attack regardless of how many lives you have. With 2 or less lives, you can jump, and with 1, you can double jump and float. At this point, I had the basic idea, so I could start modeling the main character in Blender. I'm sure you know what's the first step to model anything. Yeah, you need to delete the default cube. I didn't know yet that the character will be a tomato, I just wanted to make something round to be able to make a rolling mechanism, which idea also has been thrown away later. I made his body, added 2 legs and 2 arms and some hair. There's only one thing missing: the bones. I'm not good in biology, but I know that tomatoes have bones, right? So I added him a few, did some weight painting and started to make the animations. I made running, attacking, jumping, sacrificing, floating and some others which I ended up not using. That was the end of day 1. On the second day, I opened up Unity, imported the model and set up the player controller. Almost successfully. For some reason, there was a bug in the idle animation. As you can see, his feet are moving up and down instead of his body. If I check the freeze position Y, it works properly. Also, if I make the rigid body kinematic, it works fine, but in that way I couldn't make the jumping system, so I ended up with a workaround. I just freeze the Y position whenever the player is on the ground. This way the animation is correct. If the player wants to jump, I unfreeze the Y position so I can apply force to the player and make the tomato jump, and when it lands, I freeze it again. After I finished the player controller and everything worked fine, I had to make a heart symbol to display the amount of lives you have. For this, I used GIMP. At this point the system worked. You could run, jump, double jump, float and sacrifice a life. I also made some temporary enemies to test the attack system. On day 3 I still didn't have the boss. Who could be a worthy opponent for a tomato? Yeah, grapes.
An evil grapes.
So I deleted one more default cube and started to modeling the grapes. This time I tried out something new, Blender's particle system. This way I needed to model only one grape. That's how you say it, right? This is a grape and this is a grapes. Okay, so I made one and used the particle system to spawn more. It could be better, but it will do the job for now. Lastly, I did the animations, an intro, 2 attacks, a hurt and a die animation. I set it up in Unity, added some lights and started to make the level layout. For that, I quickly made a spike model and covered the floor with them. The boss will have more phases. In the first 2 phases the floor will be above the spikes and then it goes down and brings some more challenge. In order to enter the next phase, you have to hit all the switches, so I needed to program this mechanism as well. So hit the switches, then a grape appears, which you have to hit in order to deal damage to the boss. But you have to be fast because it explodes after a few seconds. On the 4th day, I made the tutorial level and did some improvements on the boss level. At the moment, there are no obstacles, only the spikes, so I made a bug thing which follows you everywhere and some lasers, because lasers are cool. Basically, the lasers move between 3 points. They are under the floor, then comes up, move to the other side of the level and then goes back to their original position. At the beginning of day 5, I had the whole gameplay finished, everything worked, I just needed some polish. No, not you. I needed a few visual effects and audio. I started with the visual effects. For this, I used Unity's VFX graph to make some cool particles for collecting lives, killing a bug, and when the grape explodes. On day 6, I made the music and the sound effects. For the music, I used FL Studio. For the boss fight, I made a few chords, a simple melody, and drums. For the menu and the tutorial level, I just made a different version of the chords without the melody and drums. For the sound effects, I used my own voice and recorded it with Audacity. I made a list which contains all parts of the game where I wanted to put a sound effect in. I recorded several sounds for the same effect so I could choose the best out of them later. After recording, I edited them in FL Studio. Basically, I just selected the best sounding ones and did some pitch shifting, EQ, and put some reverb where needed. Lastly, I set them up in Unity and the game was finished. On the last day, I only had one task: to submit the game to the jam. Tell me in the comment section what do you like the most and what the least in the game. And if you wanna see more content like this, click on the video on the screen right now.
Wow.